Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The second phase of Alberta's relaunch is underway. We hear from Lethbridge business owners who give us their reaction. Alberta Health Services has a warning for parents involving young children and batteries. And U.S. political reporter Lisa Daftari says former U.S. President Donald Trump isn't going away anytime soon and has a plan to help the Republicans get reelected.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says with COVID-19 numbers beginning to plateau and the potential of variants spreading, relaxed restrictions announced yesterday are not going as far as many people had hoped. Our province is now allowing libraries to open in a limited capacity at 15%, and low-intensity indoor group workouts like Tai Chi and Pilates are allowed. The second phase of the province's economic relaunch plan was also expected to include expanded crowds in retail stores, along with eased restrictions on hotels, conference centres and banquet halls. Kenney says we're not out of the woods just yet, but we can continue taking small steps forward. Alberta Health Minister Tyler Shandro says there was a little bit of confusion about the Monday announcement in regards to what's allowed and what's not allowed when it comes to gyms. Shandro says it's all about low-intensity workouts.
Low-intensity solo and group fitness activities will now be allowed indoors. They can be done anytime, provided that you make an appointment. Low-intensity fitness is stuff that doesn't make you breathe significantly harder than you usually do. High-intensity fitness is any kind of exercise that does make you breathe a lot harder than usual. And the higher your heart rate, the higher your breathing rate will be. Now, it's not about what activity you're doing or where, it's about the intensity. Now, we know that this will vary between people and depending on somebody's individual level of fitness. And that's why gym and studio and fitness center operators need to use their best judgment in identifying what category their group exercises or exercise classes fall into.
Gym enthusiasts across the province can look forward to donning their workout gear once again, thanks to the province's recent announcement. As Micah Quinn explains, even though there's been some confusion on the full list of new rules, people are just happy to be able to get back to working out.
Gym goers were welcomed back today at Lethbridge Fit for Less as part of Step 2 of the Alberta government's COVID-19 economic relaunch. Low-intensity exercises like weightlifting, using treadmills and ellipticals, and the use of machines is now allowed once again.
Obviously, we would like to be open again like we were and be 24 hours and be able to invite everybody into the gym, but we agree, like with the government, we want to open slowly and cautiously and safely, and we follow all government guidelines and mandates in order to do so.
Alberta officials mentioned yesterday in the daily COVID-19 update that all indoor fitness will have to be by appointment only, and masks have to be worn by trainers and customers who are working out with low-intensity activities.
Speaking about masks, they can be uncomfortable. I get that, but we want to do our part to be safe. And they just take some getting used to. I mean, personally, I found that I kind of get used to it as I go. Low intensity, my mask on. I look at it as a good challenge to my cardiovascular workout to improve my lungs and my oxygen intake. And I want to do my part because I want to get back to full workouts and inviting everybody to the gym. So I think if we all do our part and follow what the government has asked us to do, we'll get back there much sooner.
High-intensity workouts will not be permitted unless they are done with a trainer one-on-one. Going forward, there has been some questions about what that will look like for gyms.
As far as the intensity part, again, it was a little bit confusing between the announcement and then the actual written text, but I think it more than anything has to do with like the spray of moisture when people are, because they don't want anything basically where you're breathing hard, right? Policing that is a bit challenging due to what's heavy for one person might be light for another person.
Government officials will make a decision in 3 weeks' time if they will start Step 3 of the relaunch. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The province announced Monday that it will wait at least 3 weeks before making a decision on Phase 3 of reopening our economy. Large-scale operations in the city, including LA Chefs Catering in Lethbridge, say they're not surprised that officials are holding off on banquet-style events.
Step 2 mentioned conference centers, but then step 4 mentions the gatherings and the weddings and that sort of thing. So I'm not sure what we would have been able to do anyway in step 2. So it's disappointing, yet not surprising. The lack of information in a timely manner. When we do get the information, it's confusing. We really feel for our clients because they're trying to make plans, sometimes years in advance. And it's difficult when we really don't have the answers that they need from us. And so we look to the government to sort of get that clarity and those answers. And unfortunately, it's been a little convoluted.
The province is currently below 450 hospitalizations, which was the benchmark for moving into phase 2. Lethbridge police are investigating following a motor vehicle pedestrian collision on Monday. A 35-year-old woman was hit and sustained serious injuries. The accident occurred around 9 p.m. Monday night at 10th Avenue and Mayor McGrath Drive South. The victim was originally taken to Chinook Hospital, but then transported to a Calgary hospital with life-threatening injuries. Police say that neither speed nor alcohol were factors in the collision. The traffic response unit was called out and has taken over the investigation. Lethbridge Police and RCMP were taken for a ride all the way to the U.S. border yesterday. Cardston RCMP received a report of a stolen vehicle. The Raymond RCMP attempted to stop the vehicle with assistance from Lethbridge Police, but the driver got away. The LPS crime suppression team chased the vehicle all the way to the U.S. border, where the driver was then arrested with the help of Border Patrol and the RCMP. Police say multiple charges are pending and the vehicle has been returned to its rightful owner. When it comes to vehicle maintenance, being on top of repairs is vital so you don't receive a huge bill down the road. Now that's according to Sean Hammond from Big Al's Auto in Lethbridge. Sean says if timing belts are not replaced, they could easily snap, causing major internal damage to your engine.
And that's usually how people learn those hard lessons, is that you have one break. And timing belts, if you do them when you're supposed to do them, they might cost you from $400 to $800. If they break, it's going to cost you between $4,000 and $7,000, right? So, I mean, it's a big hit, but it's better than replacing your motor.
Sean will also talk about why more vehicle manufacturers are leaving conventional oil behind and going to synthetics. That interview is coming up after Business News. Now, what's the expression in southern Alberta? If you don't like the temperature and you don't like the weather, you wait 5 minutes. We went from minus 35 degrees a couple of weeks ago to spring-like conditions today. The polar vortex has ended, and this weekend is expected to bring unseasonably warm temperatures as high as 18 degrees to the Windy City. A meteorologist from Environment Canada explains why this is happening.
And so now that cold air has retreated to the north. It hasn't left the province. There were still temperatures of minus 20 this morning in northern Alberta. But over the southwestern parts of Alberta, we're seeing the air is coming from the Pacific Northwest. And so it's flowing over the mountains and descending into the Lethbridge area. So we've got westerly winds that's bringing some drier, warmer air into the province. So with forecast highs of 17 degrees this Friday, we're looking at about 13 degrees above normal for this time of year. And compared to the February that was on average 8 degrees colder than normal, I think it's going to feel particularly warm in Lethbridge.
Meteorologists say that these warm temperatures won't be here for long, and the month of March will return back to average temperatures just above zero for southwestern Alberta. Alberta Health Services has sent out a warning following several recent cases of young children swallowing button batteries in the Calgary and Edmonton areas. Health officials in the AHS South Zone want to remind parents of the dangers of the small round batteries. They say if a child has swallowed a button battery, to watch out for the following symptoms: trouble breathing, wheezing or drooling, coughing, gagging when eating, trouble swallowing, chest pain, and even a fever. AHS says if your child has swallowed a button battery, to not induce vomiting, but to take them to the emergency department right away. Officials say to always keep all batteries locked up out of sight and out of reach of children. The recent changes to Canadian divorce law must keep kids first. That's according to Legal Aid Alberta. Tahira Karim is a family lawyer with Legal Aid Alberta. She says the new laws will not only promote children's best interests, but will also help reduce family violence and make the justice system more accessible.
The new Divorce Act focuses on 3 things. So it encourages the parties who are in an impossible situation, the family is breaking up, but it really encourages them to communicate and encourages settlement and negotiation before coming to the courts. So I think that's always in the best interest of the children. I also feel that the reduction or the view that family violence, if there is any, will impact decision-making of a court. And it is a factor in a separation in parenting plans and, any decision-making parents are doing is also in the best interest of children because violence affects children. And then finally, it's more than the best interest, which is the overarching principle. But I do feel, and colleagues of mine feel the same way, that parties are going to have to demonstrate to the courts how their decision-making or the things that they're requesting to happen or not happen are going to have a positive impact on the children that are affected.
According to Stats Canada, more than 5 million Canadians have separated or divorced within the last 20 years. Around 49% of those ended a common law relationship, while 44% ended a legal marriage. A group of elementary school students in Calgary say they will not give up their fight to rename their school. Langevin School is named after Hector Louis Langevin, a father of Confederation who many see as an architect behind Canada's residential school system. The students made their case before the Calgary Board of Education and the trustees last week, but they say they've been discouraged by the lack of feedback. In a statement, the board said it is working to develop a process to revisit the naming of schools. Parents from many Manitoba school divisions want the province to lift restrictions on not allowing wind instruments to be played in schools. Parent groups are outraged that the restrictions placed on band practice are causing mental health issues among students. Chief Public Health Officer Dr. Brent Rusens says playing wind instruments and singing can increase the risk of COVID-19 transmission. The superintendents of both the Louis Riel School Division and Pembina Trail School Division say they have no plans to lift band restrictions until the province tells them otherwise. The Saskatchewan government says it has allocated the entire $200 million contingency fund it set up last year to cover the costs of the pandemic. The province says $40 million was spent on the reopening of schools last September, and the bulk of the remaining $160 million will go to the Saskatchewan Health Authority. $20 million will also be used to pay for grants to small business owners hurt by the COVID-19 restrictions, and $17 million is to be spent on tourism. The new spending comes as the province prepares to table its spring budget on April the 6th. Meanwhile, in Quebec, the first day of mass vaccinations began at the Montreal Convention Centre. Around 2,000 people were scheduled to get their COVID-19 vaccine shots. It was the first day all Quebecers over the age of 70 were eligible to be vaccinated.
So our current capacity is to vaccinate 2,000 people per day here at the Palais des Congrès on an appointment basis. And so far, we're fully booked for the day, so we're pretty happy about that. Things are running smoothly as well. 2,000 per day based on our supply of vaccines, but we'd be able to go up to 3,000 doses per day with the current setup. We have a technical staff of about 50% at a time on 2 different work shifts, plus all the support staff, so it goes above 100 people per day working on the site. With the beginning of the population campaign, we've been asked to book the second dose appointment on site. So before people leave, we make sure that everybody has their second appointment in about 84 days from the first dose. Everybody seems to be going well, so people come in, get their vaccine, they have their 15 minutes period of wait time, and then they're off on their way, no major reaction.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump says he's not done with politics. He recently told supporters at a Republican Party rally that he wants to help unite conservatives across the United States. Political reporter Lisa Daftari says Trump says whomever he puts his support behind will become the next president.
So regardless of whether he's going to be the front man or the guy who plays behind the scenes, he has a very important voice. He did not say that he's going to run for office. He said he's not going to divide by forming a third party. But again, regardless of what he decides to do, his voice will be very important. If he decides to stay in media, if he decides to stay in consulting, if he decides to just put his power behind any other candidate, that will be enough to take that candidate to the presidency.
Lisa will also have details of the Pope heading to Iraq this week. That Q&A with Ms. Daftari is coming up later in our newscast. Asian Americans are on edge after a recent wave of assaults and robberies attacking their communities. More than 3,000 incidents have been reported to a California-based reporting center since the pandemic began last year.
As they approached me, they pulled me to the ground. They punched me. I was resisting with them. I was yelling, I was screaming, help and stop. What I had learned the next day, later that evening, they had attacked another Asian American woman that same night. Asian American women and elders were being targeted, often for cultural reasons. They're reluctant to speak out, to press charges.
Since the pandemic, it got so much worse. And what we are seeing, is not only increasing of the numbers, But I guess the seriousness of the attacks are getting more and more violent. Even though they live inside Chinatown, they are telling me that they are afraid to walk on their own streets. And this is very sad.
We have seen that we Asians being targeted for robberies and assault. People feeling unsafe coming to Chinatown to shop. We want to make sure that the customers are being protected and they encouraged to feel safe to come to Chinatown. That's why we started this volunteer group to patrol in Oakland Chinatown.
When Dallas, Texas was hit by last month's extreme winter storm, a Christian organization came to help the city's homeless. Operation Care International provided vital food and clothing to so many of the city's most vulnerable. As we hear in this next report, the group even set up a special event on Valentine's Day called the Banquet of Love.
On the weekend of Valentine's Day, at the peak of the winter storms in Dallas and Texas, Christian charity Operation Care International partnered with several ministries to host a banquet of love for the homeless in a building that used to be a strip club. Volunteers served a free Valentine's meal as well as distributing shoes, warm coats and new clothes. And these ministry leaders and volunteers explained why they had got involved in this outreach.
That's the reason why I'm doing it. It's for the kingdom of God.
Thank you. We're all the way from Independence, Missouri, and it's just all about Jesus, man, showing the love of God to his beloved people, that's what it's all about.
We are here to serve the sons and the daughters of the Lord.
I really felt the Lord was like, you have to do this. You have to come and you have to be able to give back.
I represent Noble Life Outreach. Our main focus is to reconcile people to Christ. That's our main focus and our only focus.
I was a drug addict for 9 years. I was hooked on crack cocaine, heroin, PCP, ecstasy. I lost everything because of drugs. But somebody preached to me the gospel of Jesus. They told me that Jesus would change my life. I gave my life to the Lord. I'm not a drug addict anymore. And everything that I lost, God gave me back. The grace and mercy of my life, has been displayed, and we just want to show the same thing.
On the day, 6 people decided to accept Jesus, and OCI director Mike Tyrone had the joy of baptizing 4 of them in the mobile baptism truck.
I just love redemption stories, people giving their life to the Lord. This is a perfect picture of God redeeming and taking back what the enemy tried to steal.
And this man concluded by sharing what this banquet of love had meant to him.
Fellowship, the entire fellowship.
Amen.
Seeing everybody come together, all for one cause.
Peter Wooding for the Global News Alliance.
It was a windy but mild day in the city once again today, and the mercury will be climbing even further. A good time to maybe pull out the barbecue once again. A complete look at the weather picture is coming up. We have been seeing some incredible weather lately here in southwestern Alberta. A lot of the snow has melted. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a complete look at the weather picture. Jeanette, thanks to the Chinook winds, will we be breaking any records anytime soon?
Well, as far as records go this week, Hal, we will have to be keeping an eye on Thursday, which is March 4th. So the high temperature for that day on record was 16.8, and we're looking at a possibility of a high of 16 that day. When we're looking into Friday, which is a high of 17, on that date, actually the record was 20 degrees. So we're not quite there yet, is what I'm trying to say. We'd have to get over 20 in order to break that record for this week. Windy conditions, though, as you were mentioning before with those Chinook winds, 50 to 70 kilometer hour winds overnight tonight, high of 0 this evening. Into tomorrow, Wednesday, 12 degrees. We're going to be dealing with the 50K winds as well. Into Thursday, as I was mentioning, 16 the high, 17 for Friday. 15 for Saturday, 10 degrees on Sunday, and down to 4 degrees on Monday with increasing clouds for next Monday. So looking at these lovely temperatures on these wonderful double digits, we are certainly higher than the range for what our averages should be for this time of year. Average high, 4 degrees, average low, -9 right here. 17 was our high temperature on this day back in 1994. In 1960, we had our chilliest on record, which was -35, yuck. 7:12 was when the sun rose this morning. Sunset this evening right at 6:15 p.m. So there you have it, about 11 hours of daylight just like that. Over on the west coast tomorrow, Victoria sitting even at 10 degrees, 9 degrees in Vancouver with increasing clouds in the afternoon. 7 for Edmonton under sunny skies, sunshine also expected tomorrow in Calgary with a high of 8 degrees. Both of those cities experiencing about 15 kilometer per hour winds tomorrow. Not too bad compared to what we have had recently. For the rest of the prairies too, winds not so bad in Saskatoon, about 15 km. 0 is the high for Saskatoon, 7 for Regina, 15 km/h winds. A little bit more windy in Winnipeg, up to 20 km/h. They're going to feel the wind chill tomorrow too. It's going to feel more like -17 compared to what their actual temperature is, which is 0. Now in Toronto, we got a chance of flurries, changing to a chance of showers. 8 degrees the high there, 2 the high for Ottawa and 1 for Montreal. Both Ottawa and Montreal experiencing flurries tomorrow. Fredericton and Halifax, lots of sunshine there tomorrow, -2 in Fredericton, -1 in Halifax. -4 the expected high tomorrow in Charlottetown with up to 2 centimeters of snow. St. John's, Newfoundland, also expecting quite a bit more snow and up to 80 km/h winds there with blowing snow in exposed areas. -4 is the high there, so there you have it. That is your forecast.
Canadian farmers reaped record profits last year and are on track of doing the same thing this year. That's according to the Federal Agriculture Ministry. Prices of canola hit all-time highs last month, rallying with soybeans. Demand for Canadian barley also surged. The record profits came despite disruptions to beef and pork production as COVID-19 infections forced some plants to suspend processing, leading to a backlog of livestock and lower prices. Livestock sales slipped 1.9% last year. Farmers' net cash income jumped almost 22% in 2020 from the previous year to $16.5 billion. Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada says it was driven by increased sales value of the main field crops. The Calgary Real Estate Board says home sales hit their highest level in 7 years. The board says sales were up more than 54% to 1,836 units. Prices were also up about 8% to just under $486,000. The Real Estate Board is crediting the continued rollout of COVID-19 vaccines and low mortgage rates for the booming market despite continued public health restrictions. The year 2020 is going into the history books for a long list of reasons, including the pandemic's impact on the Canadian economy. Stats Canada says gross domestic product contracted 5.4%. That's the economy's lowest showing since it began tracking data 60 years ago. The agency is estimating January growth of 0.5%, which economists say should set aside fears of an outright downturn in the first quarter. BMO Chief Economist Douglas Porter says we can now look for new growth drivers to kick into gear as the economy reopens in stages this year. Toy maker Spin Master is reporting fourth quarter net income of around $300,000. That's compared with a net loss of $17.2 million a year earlier. The turnaround came as its revenue grew 3.6% to just over $490 million US. Spin Master says an increase in sales of activities like kinetic sand and Paw Patrol toys offset declines in remote control games and interactive characters like Hatchimals. Company officials say they made significant operational improvements and cost efficiencies last year while navigating through the pandemic. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 121 points in the day to finish at 18,422. The Dow was down 143 points to 31,392. The S&P 500 was down 31 points to 3870, and the Nasdaq was down 230 points on the day to 13,359. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $1.14 to $59.50 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 7 cents to $2.85 US. Gold was down 2 cents to $17.3834 US an ounce, and silver was even on the day at $26.76 US an ounce. Wheat is at $308 per metric ton, barley's at $310, canola's at $7.53, and corn is at $345 per metric ton. Live cattle were up 45 cents to $119.43, feeder cattle were down 68 cents to $136.53, and lean hogs were down $2.38 to $85.35. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 79.13 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Lethbridge police are investigating following a motor vehicle pedestrian collision on Monday. A 35-year-old woman was hit and sustained serious injuries. The accident occurred around 9 p.m. Monday night at 10th Avenue and Mayor McGrath Drive South. The victim was originally taken to Chinook Hospital, but then transported to a Calgary hospital with life-threatening injuries. Police say that neither speed nor alcohol were factors in the collision. When it comes to maintaining your vehicle, should we use conventional or synthetic oil? What are some of the do's and don'ts when it comes to making your vehicle last a little bit longer? Sean Hammond from Big Al's Auto has some tips for us in an interview with BCN's Jeanette Rocher next.
Many of us rely on our vehicles to get to work, to school, to shop, etc. And when it breaks down, it can be an expensive surprise. Today, we want to talk about how to properly maintain a vehicle and hopefully avoid some of these nasty surprises. Today's guest is Sean Hammond. He's the owner of Big L's Auto Repair right here in Lethbridge. And you're joining me from your shop via Zoom. So welcome to BCN, John.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. So how often do you see people come in with expensive vehicle repairs that could have been prevented with proper maintenance? That's basically what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, so proper maintenance is really important when you're talking about the longevity of your vehicle. Oil changes are the biggest part of that, and that's what we see the most. People who go too long on an oil change and causes engine failures and other bad stuff.
Okay, so let's talk about oil changes a little bit. So most of the time when people get oil changes, they get those little stickers that they put up in the windshield there. So are you finding that people are just ignoring that little sign that says when your next oil change should be, or do they lose the stickers, or how does that work?
Sometimes the stickers fall off. Lots of people rely on their car's vehicle maintenance reminder to tell them when they should change their oil as well. So they ignore the sticker because they have a light that comes on that tells them when to change it.
Yeah, and a lot of times those stickers are kind of like the lower mark too. You can sometimes go a lot further than what the sticker says. You advise that though?
I don't. We always say you should change your oil more regularly than less regularly. So I mean, if you're pushing it to the limit every time, that can definitely cause problems in the long run. That being said, manufacturers that build the cars, they know when you should be changing your oil. So if you go by the light, just make sure that as soon as the light comes on, you're going to get your oil changed.
Interesting. Okay, so should we be using regular oil or synthetic oil? I know some of the more expensive German cars, the luxury cars, definitely advise for those synthetic oils, don't they?
Well, a lot of cars actually now are going to synthetic oil. Most car manufacturers have gone to completely synthetic. GM has been doing it for years. But Dodge and Toyota and all those other guys, they are also headed that direction as well. So they don't really give you an option not to use synthetic.
Wow. Now, isn't it quite a bit more expensive than the regular oil?
It's come down in price quite a bit. And a synthetic oil change will probably cost you about $15 or $20 more than a regular oil change. But they're also extending the life of those oil changes as well, so you can go longer on your money.
Yes, that's true. Like I know, like if you have a Mercedes, you might only need one oil change a year, but it'll cost like $200 or something. Is that right?
Yeah. So not from us. There are some major car manufacturers, especially the higher end guys, where the oil is very specific and very special, and they get a little bit more expensive. Toyota is actually just rolled out a new type of oil that they're using in their cars, and it is quite expensive to use.
Oh, yikes. Good to know if you're on the market looking for a Toyota. Any specific kind of Toyota or just any Toyota, the newer ones?
We had one in the other day. It was a 2019 Camry, and it used a very specialized oil that we had never even heard of until the car had come in. But it was a 0 weight, 16 weight motor oil.
Oh, wow. Okay, interesting. So let's switch gears. Let's talk about tires. It's not uncommon, especially now that it's winter, we're turning into spring. So it's not uncommon to get those slow leaks, right, in the tire, particularly when in the wintertime. So the weather's going constantly from cold to mild, back to cold, back to mild. I know that Sean, I'm constantly getting that low tire pressure alert going off in my car. And then you end up driving on a half flat tire. So what kinds of issues can this cause? Is it a big safety issue?
So yes, absolutely. So tires are your only point of contact from your car to the road. So we think that they're one of the most important things on your car. So when you have low tire life, you can actually reduce your gas mileage, you can reduce your safety, because you want to get maximum contact out of those tires all the time. So all car manufacturers have a recommended pressure that you should run your tires at, and that's where you should always try and keep your tires at. That being said, in the winter, yes, tire pressures do fluctuate, especially in Southern Alberta, where we can go from -20 to +20 in a couple of days. So that definitely throws a wrench into things, so to speak. So definitely just keep an eye on your tire pressures. You should always have a tire pressure gauge in your car so that you can check them if one is low.
Okay, so is it worth it to get winter tires?
The people who say that winter tires don't make a difference have never had winter tires, we often find. So yes, we do believe that winter tires are a good thing. Us and all of our staff, we all run winter tires in the winter and summer tires in the summer. Tire technology has actually come a long way. You can actually get something called all-weather tires now, and they are a little bit more grippy in the winter, but they do wear better in the summer, so you don't burn them off like winter tires do.
Okay, so that's all weather as opposed to
All season.
All season, right? Okay, interesting. Yes. So, how do you know when it's time to get new tires, and how often should you rotate them?
Most car manufacturers say every other oil change you should be rotating your tires. Quite often, we don't see the benefit in that every time, but whenever we have somebody's car who we regularly maintain, we check their tires every time they do an oil change, so that we can tell them when it's time to rotate their tires or not. Usually works out to about every third or fourth oil change.
Okay, let's talk about battery. So what do we need to know to take care of our battery? Is the cold weather really bad on the battery? I'm really bad for plugging my car in because I have a brand new battery, and so it usually starts. But is it bad on the battery to make it start in -30 weather if you haven't plugged it in?
So that's a common misconception, actually. When you plug in your car, you're not actually plugging in your battery.
Correct.
You're plugging in a heater that keeps your engine warm, so that, just keeps your engine warm, not your battery. So when you turn your car over, there's less strain on the battery. Instead of trying to turn over an ice block, you're turning over a warmer engine so that it turns over easier, which is better for your battery in the long run. But the best thing that you can do for your battery is not let it sit in the cold for days or weeks on end. Start your car every other day at least and keep that charged.
Yeah, for sure. So when do we need to get a new battery?
Most batteries last between 5 and 6 years. That being said, sometimes when we have a really nasty cold winter, sometimes that will decrease the life of a battery, but most batteries have some kind of warranty for 5 or 6 years.
Nice. So, and then of course, sometimes it might not be your battery that's giving you the issue. So we may have an alternator problem, right? So what can you tell us about that?
So alternators are a system in your car that is designed to keep your battery charged when it's running. Alternators that are overcharging or undercharging will definitely decrease the life of your battery. Usually you will get a little red light that looks like a battery pop up on your dash saying that something is wrong. Don't ever ignore that. It's really important.
Yeah, interesting, as are all of these, the oil,
Yes.
The brakes, everything, right? So what about air filters? It sounds like a minor thing, but can this cause serious problems if it doesn't get replaced regularly?
Usually not serious problems. I mean, we have seen some strange things, but air filters that are dirty will definitely give you reduced gas mileage. They will also give you reduced engine performance.
Okay. Now, on your website blog, you have an article about the importance of getting your belts checked, especially your timing belt. Can you explain why this is key?
Sure. So drive belts, serpentine belts, and other kinds of belts, other than your timing belt, they drive your alternator. Lots of times they'll drive a water pump or a power steering pump. So if they break, then you lose that stuff. Serpentine belts tend to run all of that stuff off of one belt. So if your belt goes, then all of a sudden your vehicle's very hard to steer. It's not charging properly. It's not cooling the engine off properly. It's bad. Timing belts, however, are even more important. They need to be changed by your vehicle's recommendation, manufactured recommendation, usually around every 100 to 150,000 kilometers. They are what keep your engine in time so that everything is working together. When they break, Most new cars, they call them interference engines. That means if your timing belt breaks, you're going to start bending valves and damaging pistons and doing major internal damage in your engine. So ignoring that can be detrimental to the life of your vehicle.
Yeah, absolutely. I had that happen to me years and years ago, back when I was young with my first car. And it was not good. It was a bad, tough lesson to learn about timing belts for
Yeah.
sure.
And that's usually how people learn those hard lessons, is that you have one break. And timing belts, if you do them when you're supposed to do them, they might cost you from $400 to $800. If they break, it's going to cost you between $4,000 and $7,000, right? So, I mean, it's a big hit, but it's better than replacing your motor.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so spark plugs, they can last a lot longer than they used to, but this is a key thing, right, for the car, the spark plug.
Yes, absolutely. So spark plugs are one of those things that have really come a long way technology-wise. Spark plugs used to have to be changed every 40 to 50,000 kilometers, and now they can go up to 180 to 200,000 kilometers before they need to be changed, which is great for the consumer because it's not something they have to worry about as much. But when they do start to go, they will cause lots of problems. Your engine doesn't run properly, fuel mileage goes to crap, it can leave you stranded on the side of the road.
Yeah, for sure. So how about brakes? This is one thing that we need to keep an eye on. How do you know when it's time to get some brake work done? Or to top off the brake fluid too, for that matter.
Well, typically brake fluid is only ever low unless if you have a leak or if your brakes are worn out. So if your brake fluid is low, it's always a good idea to have a look at the actual brake pads and see if they're worn out. If they're still good, then you might want to start having a mechanic look at some other issues. Brakes are obviously very important. They're what stop you. Stopping is important. So brake pads that are starting to wear out will usually start to make some noise. It usually starts with a light squeal, and then the squeal will get heavier. And then if you let it go too far and you ignore that and just keep turning up your radio, then you start getting grinding and starts doing more damage to other systems.
That's when you get that knocking sound, right?
Yeah, usually it's a really loud scraping sound, and it sounds like you're dragging your muffler behind you.
Oh, yikes. Let's avoid that, please, at all costs.
Yes, please do.
Yeah. Okay, well, spring is just around the corner. Of course, that means it'll be summer soon. So every summer, of course, we see vehicles on the side of the road with overheated engines. So how can we prevent that sort of thing from happening? And usually it's a transmission problem, isn't it?
Actually, no. Usually, if you see somebody who's on the side of the road with their hood up, usually it's because of another mechanical failure. Transmissions, again, have come a really long way. Same with transmission fluids. You don't have to change them as often. That being said, there's a multitude of reasons why you could get stuck on the side of the road in the summer. Cars are full of technology and computers now, and we all know how technology works. Sometimes when it works, it's great. When it doesn't, it is not great at all. So we don't see as many overheated cars anymore because the systems are so efficient. But you should always check your fluids once a month, check to make sure your coolant is topped up, check to make sure your oil is topped up, power steering fluid. Even power steering fluid is going by the wayside. Most cars have electronic power steering now, so they don't take fluid. It's all driven by an electronic motor. But if that fails, that can also cause you all kinds of problems.
Mm-hmm. And there's also different kinds of transmissions, right? There's a CV transmission and that. So what's the difference between that and the regular kind of transmission?
Automatic transmissions traditionally had a series of gears inside, and you'd switch from first gear to second gear to third gear. CVT transmissions do not have gears in them anymore. They're basically two opposing cones, and they work kind of like the gears on your bike do. When you get bigger gears, then you get more resistance, but you get more speed, and vice versa. So basically, CVT transmissions work kind of like that, without the actual physical gear shift.
Oh gosh, yeah. Very technical. So, Sean, what advice do you have for someone who's shopping for a good mechanic? What kinds of things should people be looking for or asking about?
I always say that you should do some homework, look into the shop, call the shop, ask for a quote about something, talk to the staff, We do digital inspection for our customers. So when our customers come in and they are looking to get something diagnosed or fixed, or even just an oil change, we send them, we do a digital inspection report that actually gets texted to their phone. And if we see something wrong, we can actually show them with pictures or videos what exactly we see in the shop so that everything's transparent. They can see what we see. We're not calling stuff just for fun. It's, this is what's wrong. This is why it's wrong. We can send educational videos along with that on how those systems work so that people know exactly what they're getting into and why it's important.
Oh, I love that idea, bringing in some technology there.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Well, it looks like we are out of time, but thanks so much for your expertise, Sean. We really appreciate having you on our show today. Sean Hammond is the owner of Big Al's Auto Repair here in Lethbridge.
Thank you so much.
The Pope is going on a road trip. To talk about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, Pope Francis is headed to Iraq March 5th through the 8th. Do we know the purpose of the papal visit?
Yeah, this is an unusual visit. Those around the Pope say he hasn't left, obviously, the Vatican in over a year because of COVID, and now he is gung-ho about leaving, and where to? Iraq. This would be the first papal visit to Iraq, and those who are following this say that it is to, reunite the presence of Christians in the Middle East with the current narrative. And it's extremely important because, in the backdrop of everything going on, obviously there's a lot of insurgencies, there's ISIS, there's Al-Qaeda, there's the Iranian regime, there's Saudi Arabia fighting the Iranian regime. There's all these proxy wars going on the ground. But in the backdrop of all of this, we forget that the Christian population was once a very important, integral part of these societies in all of these countries, particularly in Iraq, where there was maybe 10% of the population was Christian, and now you have hardly 1%. Obviously, they have left, they have fled because of ISIS, because of the wars going on there for so many years. But this should at least be a symbolic reminder that the Middle East is made up of just more than just Shiite Muslims or Sunni Muslims. There were Jews there, there's Zoroastrians there, there's Baha'is, Christians, Catholics, so many different denominations, and this should be, at least, if only on the symbolic level, a trip that represents unity among all.
Now, let me ask you something. Any concerns about the Pope's safety going to Iraq?
Right, absolutely. And I think that's very much underscored in a lot of these reports, that he's been told maybe this isn't the best time to go. And he said, you know what, I'm willing to risk it. Obviously with not just COVID, but, security risks. There was just an attack in the green zone in Iraq on U.S. assets. So we know that it's not a safe place. So pandemic aside, it's not the best time to fly regardless, but pandemic aside, it's also a lot of uncertainty on the ground there, and we wish him well in all of his travels.
Iran has apparently rejected an offer of direct U.S. nuclear talks. Iran rejected the European Union offer to arrange direct talks with U.S. senior diplomats. Now, Lisa, the U.S. is still open to Iran nuclear talks despite Iran's rejection.
Sounds like a desperate girlfriend waiting by the phone. Yes, the U.S. has been rejected, but still open to talks. If you follow this report, last week the United States said, look, we are more than open to sitting down to talks with the Iranian regime, along with our European counterparts, the original P5+1 that entered the JCPOA, which is the Iran nuclear deal in 2015. We are ready to go back at it. And the Iranian regime flat out said, nope, we're not going to come unless sanctions are removed. Now, this is a game of chicken between the United States and Iran's regime to see who's going to blink first. The United States is asking Iran to go back to the stipulations of the 2015 deal, meaning they have to limit their enrichment of uranium. They have to stop their acquisition of weapons. And in addition, they should stop a lot of their other bad activities, meaning putting money into terror and supporting these terror entities, and obviously the human rights abuses back at home. But none of that is being spoken about. We are waiting to see what the Iranian regime does. But for now, they have rejected all offers and still waiting by the phone for President Biden.
Government officials in Israel say Iran was behind a blast on an Israeli-owned cargo ship in the Gulf of Oman. Now, there were reports of Israeli attacks in Syria, I believe in Damascus, in retaliation.
Yeah, so a lot of tit for tat. Now, Iran's regime, if you remember, has still threatened to retaliate for the killing of the shadowy commander, General Qasem Soleimani. So that's still on their tab. Add to that the killing of the nuclear scientist, I don't even want to call him a scientist, the nuclear butcher, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh. So that's two big figures that were taken out by U.S./Israeli forces. And why do I say /Israeli? Whatever happens with the U.S., Iran will always assume that the Israelis were their counterpart, were their helpers in the Middle East to carry out the plan on the ground. So they blame both the U.S. and Israel for these two major assassinations, and therefore they are threatening retaliation. Now, this ship there's two holes on the side of the ship. There were two gunshots that were bored in the side of this boat. This was a clandestine spy ship, so totally undercover, wouldn't have been noticed. So they believe that the Revolutionary Guard was behind this. Of course, this morning, Iran's regime is denying all of that. So there's a lot of back and forth, as you said, a lot of tit for tat. Israel is going at it against Iran's assets in Syria, and Iran is going after Israeli assets in the sea. So a lot of proxy war going on. Nothing too escalated yet.
Former U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says many Saudis want normalization with Israel. But Lisa, let me ask you something. What do Israelis want?
Yeah, this is an interesting time period because if we rewind back to the Abraham Accords, we had a long list of enthusiastic, moderate Arab nations signing on to a peace/economic deal with Israel, meaning they're looking at the future and saying, look, we don't want bygones to be bygones. We're looking at the future. We want your technology. We want your water irrigation technology. We want your hospital machinery. We want tourism. We want to move forward, and we're going to do it with you. And Israel is extremely enthusiastic. This was, of course, brokered by the Trump White House and Jared Kushner, his son-in-law. And now, after Trump has left office, and I should say right before he left office, he said that there are still a handful of countries that are enthusiastic to get into this deal. So the question remains, what will happen under a Biden White House? Will we still have these countries sign on to the Abraham Accords? And the biggest country that is in question is Saudi Arabia. Now, the backstory of all of this is to say that these moderate Arab nations that have already signed on to the Abraham Accords wouldn't have been able to do so without the blessing of the biggest power, the Arab power in the Middle East, and that is Saudi Arabia. So, of course, now that we hear that they are ready to sign on, well, it makes sense that they are. But what will happen now? We know that the Biden administration wants to cozy up to Iran, meaning it's going to do an about face from the Arab nations, from Israel, from Saudi Arabia. But the Middle East has a new order. It has a future to look forward to. So this is an extremely exciting time for the Middle East, for their futures, and we'll see how the Iran deal will fit into all of this.
Could we finally see peace in the Middle East? Wouldn't that be something? Now let's bring things a little closer to home for just a moment here, Lisa. At a recent Republican Party rally, former U.S. President Donald Trump says he will not launch a third federal party despite the rumors, but instead he says conservatives really need to unite.
Yes, and he's the man to make that message and for people to listen. Look, this was at the CPAC conference that took place in Orlando this year. Obviously, couldn't take place in Washington, D.C. It was an extremely important moment. And look at all of the support that President Trump has, especially around this conference. There was a straw poll where President Trump won by a landslide. There was a statue of President Trump there. And obviously, President Trump is extremely popular with this crowd. They were waiting for him to speak. This is the first public speech that he has made since leaving office. And the media reports, I should say the mainstream media reports, were waiting for him to announce that he's going to run for office in 2024, and he did not do that. And I think it was a very prudent move for him to come out and say, look, my work is done, but I'm going to serve as the figure to tell you guys that we have to unite. If we divide, we're going to be even more divided than ever before. We're going to give the left what it wants. We're going to give the media what it wants. So let's unite, all of us. And it's very big of him to say. This is exactly the kind of messaging that we needed when he was in office, and now that he's out of office, perhaps he could serve as a uniting figure for the Republicans.
Now, some are asking if Trump is actually finished with politics altogether, but he said his journey is far from over. Tell me more about that.
Yes, so regardless of whether he's going to be the front man or the guy who plays behind the scenes, he has a very important voice. He did not say that he's going to run for office. He said he's not going to divide by forming a third party. But again, regardless of what he decides to do, his voice will be very important. If he decides to stay in media, if he decides to stay in consulting, if he decides to just put his power behind any other candidate, that will be enough to take that candidate to the presidency. We have to remember, Hal, President Trump came very close to winning that election. I know some people will write to me now because of this segment and say, well, he won. Yes, many people believe that there was fraud and they allegedly took the election. Let's just say that he came extremely close, even by the measures of the left and the mainstream media. In a pandemic year and in a very tumultuous economy, he came very close. So just imagine what his power, what his message, what his voice could do if he decides to put it behind another candidate that could be more uniting. So regardless, I think he's right. It's far from over. I think he's going to play a very important role, regardless of whether he decides to run or not.
Lisa, as a Myanmar court filed more charges against its ousted leader, police in that country fired tear gas and stun grenades to disperse hundreds of protesters in the main city of Yangon on Monday. Now, reports say police then later combed through the side street, firing rubber bullets at even more people.
Yes, the casualties are rising every week when you and I speak. This is getting bloodier and bloodier. Look, the military forces are becoming more bold in their position to keep that leader in prison, to double down on her sentence, and to keep things as is. And the protesters are doubling down on their position to free that leader, that she was elected fair and square, that this is not the future that they want. And unfortunately, in the interim, things are getting quite bloody. They're taking to the streets. The internet is intermittently cut out, so their stories are not getting out there, and they're not able to organize as well as they'd like to organize. But despite the fact they're not staying off the streets, they're not obeying the martial law that has been in place, and they have a long way to go.
Let's talk about this pandemic aid relief bill that the Biden administration has sent off to the Senate now, over $1 trillion. What's the feel you're getting on the streets right now with a lot of Americans? Do they feel this is really enough to help with vaccinations, to help financially with a lot of struggling American businesses, a lot of American families?
Yes, well, if you've been following the news here in the United States over the last week or so, people are very, very disillusioned about how things are going, what they were promised versus what they're getting, and how we're going to come out of this mess, this pandemic, economically, in terms of vaccines, in terms of our health, in terms of our future, all of it. So we obviously were promised one thing, the bill sat on the table, nothing was done about it. We had a strike in Syria against Iran's assets there. People thought that was a distraction from getting things done and putting the American people first. And now with this bill on the table, I think a lot of people are again very skeptical of where things are going. There's no plan as was promised. Look, politics as usual, right? How with Trump's presidency, a lot of people, they wanted transparency. If you loved Trump, you claimed that he was transparent. If you hated Trump, you said that we want transparency, we want him out of office, so we want Biden. Regardless, we're living in a post-political world where people want the truth. They don't want politics. They don't want a podium president. And when they're promised a certain thing and they don't get it, it's only been about 40 days that this Biden administration has been in office. But if they're not getting what they want and things are going the other way, well, then they're going to start questioning things, and they're going to start questioning them very quickly. And that's exactly what's going on here. The political environment is skeptical. That's the best word I can use. So people are waiting for their checks. They're waiting for their vaccines. They want a vaccine schedule. They want some deadlines, and they don't want to hear, Dr. Fauci coming onto the podium and saying we're going to have to be wearing masks until, the end of next year. So it's extremely frustrating, and people are asking for a lot of answers. So the next few weeks will be very important to getting Americans answers, if nothing more.
Yeah, it was interesting. America's top doc, Anthony Fauci, was talking about Americans, wearing masks till the end of 2022. That's incredible. Now, one of our producers, Nav, was reminding me the gas is outrageously expensive where you are in Southern California. I think you're paying over, $4 a gallon? You translate that to Canadian dollars, like $1.30, more than that a liter. What's going on? And are people blaming Biden?
Yes, they are, and it's no surprise. Obviously, you have legislative moves like the cancellation of the Keystone Pipeline and his position on no fracking, and you have so much going on where people haven't been traveling, but I think a lot of eyes are on at least local trips. Trips that are 2 or 3 hours away from home for the spring, for the summer. Families that can no longer afford to make those trips, or that they're going to be extremely expensive to make those kinds of trips. So gas is extremely expensive here. We are actually the most expensive location in the United States. The East Coast, parts of the East Coast. I grew up in New Jersey, where gas is the cheapest in the country. It's the port that comes in, and California being the most expensive. But nonetheless, it shows a trend in the price of gas and the supply and demand equation here, and it's not fun. No.
Wow. Stay safe, stay home, and stay healthy, Lisa. Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Thank you, Lisa.
My pleasure.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks for watching.